Welcome to this edition of Ask Isaiah. I'm your host, Isaiah Rhodes, and on today's episode, I have Doug Marolla, the freelance teacher. And in this particular episode, we're going to discuss a myriad of things, as most of the time with my content is sports oriented, but we'll be able to dive in and maneuver through a bunch of different topics. So, Doug, I want to thank you for your time. And
Glad to be here.
recently, I've been really diving into the NCAA tournament and how the excitement of the mass tournament itself really engages and captivates the audience. But one of the things that really captivates the audience is narrative. And if you look at the Final Four, you have Loyola Chicago and how they're really a Cinderella story, an 11 seed. The lowest team to ever win a national championship is the Villanova Wildcats from 1985, and one of the Final Four participants is Villanova. They happen to be a number one seed. So when you think about the tournament and why it captivates fans, a sports fan like yourself growing up, what is it about the NCAA tournament that really gets to people?
It's funny that you bring that up because go Wildcats, because I have them winning my pool at work.
Okay.
So let me get that out of the way.
Okay.
I have them beating Xavier.
That didn't work out.
Yeah, it didn't work out. But
Right.
you know what's funny? It's funny you bring this up because I was talking about this with my wife, who is not a basketball fan by any stretch of the imagination, right? Her first language isn't even English.
Right.
And she likes the tournament. And you know why? Because one and done captures the imagination like nothing else, right? And so we've sat and watched the tournament, not very much this year, but in previous years, and it's just exciting. It's when you lose, any person with any sense of competition, if you lose, you're out. And the sense of desperation is palpable, even to non-sports fans. So when you start talking about sports fans, it's like the whole idea of sports on steroids. It's the desperation, it's the craziness to win, it's the potential upset. I always think of, I want to say it was there was a year that Princeton almost beat Villanova. Back in the days, right? In the heyday of the Big East with Hoya Destroya and Hoya Paranoia, like that. There's a great 30 for 30 on that.
Right.
Princeton almost took down Georgetown. And those things just don't happen when you have a series, a best of 5 or a best of 7 series.
Yeah, most of the time, especially in professional sports, the old adage is the best team always wins. Now, you can have more talented teams, but in terms of how a team plays over the totality of a series, for the most part, the best team always wins if all things are equally put together in terms of, health-wise and things of that nature. When you look at the tournament, I think you mentioned it in terms of upsets. For the first time in tournament history, you had a 16 seed defeat a number 1 seed.
Yep.
UMBC, the Retrievers actually beat the number 1 overall seed, the Virginia Cavaliers, who came into the tournament 31-2 that game. So, and not just UMBC, but you had University of Buffalo defeat Arizona. When you think about these upsets and what it brings out of people, I think to your point about the desperation and why it's able to galvanize so many people is because in March, especially when it comes to the madness, everybody has a chance. Everyone has an opportunity. And I think for any team that's preparing to go against the tournament, you have to truly emphasize, especially as a coach, your coaching staff, that you have to play at the highest level possible at all times. You can't really play to your competition or perceive competition, play down to your competition, because for one out of these potential 6 games, if you're trying to make a championship run, somebody may have your number. You have to adjust.
Yes. And you have to adjust quickly. And that's the thing. It's why I've always thought, I wish I'm going to try to give in these series of videos and podcasts that we do over the ensuing years, now that we finally got our act together and started.
Yeah, most definitely.
Someone mentioned, I can't remember the person's name, but they had a great thing where it should go back to, in the NBA, best 3 out of 5 in the first round. because
That
Denver,
would be definitely
yes,
exciting in certain respects. Definitely.
yes, because it adds more excitement, right? Denver taking down the Sonics in, I think it was 1994.
Right. And the
18,
iconic Mutombo holding
yes.
basketball.
Ah,
Right.
my cat's over there. She just looked at me making funny noises. But that's exciting. That's just fun. Like you don't really need to be a big sports fan necessarily, or a basketball fan per se, and have that be a big deal. So, you have the finally it happened after all these years, a 16 seed defeats a 1 seed. The gambling world goes bananas in March Madness, right? Like, I mean, the buzz and the hype. I mean, I'm a public school teacher, and we have a pool, and I won it a couple years ago, really kind of just luck. But, hundreds of dollars, and it's a big deal, and people who don't care fill one out, like, and that's us.
Right.
I can only imagine the gambling world must be going crazy nowadays with the access to information and the speed at internet gambling. So all of these things together have created, it's a lot of fun. It's kind of, I'm not a big fan of the NCAA, but I'm sure it swells the NCAA coffers with the TV contracts.
I'm glad you mentioned that in terms of how, even for the small period of time where you may have a fan of the game that doesn't necessarily love the game to the level that we made,
Right.
The tournament still is able to bring people in. You mentioned the NCAA and how they've been able to, monetize and make billions and billions of dollars off of this particular tournament and beyond. I personally morally have an issue with collegiate sports just because players aren't able to monetize off of their likeness.
Yes.
But the NCAA can continuously every 4 minutes to go to a commercial.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And for me, as a broadcaster, as a writer, and beyond, I've been able to monetize my talents off of collegiate sports. But I feel like it's something wrong if a player who especially understands their value,
yes,
can potentially, they have to struggle for a certain amount of time before they're able to get to a point. But up until that point, you have AAU programs, you have sneaker companies to make money off of these players, and these players can't work while they have to basically have a full-time job.
Yes.
Before they're able to necessarily monetize their value. So I'm glad you brought that up. In fact, specifically, especially with the University of Arizona and different high profile programs who have potential one and done players who have received impermissible benefits, that potentially could have put a stain on the NCAA tournament. But it seems like it's been swept under the rug to a certain degree, because I feel like for the first time in a while, people, in terms of the public perception of it, the people haven't necessarily vilified the athletes anymore. They understand that the NCAA is corrupt to a certain degree.
Yes. And it's real. And the old argument, I was going to try to find the article. There's a good article on this. I'll have to get back to it. But the old argument was, well, these are students who are getting free education. And that might have been true in the old days, but I don't know. You got to go way back.
Maybe the 1960s.
Maybe. But even then, right? Even then, the dollars brought in from, because the TV money hadn't gotten so big, you know what I mean? So it was attendance at games and ticket sales and things like that, and concessions and what have you. But so that wasn't a great argument back then. It was viable.
Right.
But now the proportion now is so out of whack, where the numbers in terms of income regarding TV contracts, radio contracts, sales, T-shirts, I mean, the licensing alone, it has got, the numbers are off the charts.
Right.
And so the numbers, the proportionality has gotten completely out of whack, that argument is, even to somebody like me, is
it's either naive
ridiculous.
or ignorant.
Um, I think willfully. I think that argument now is willfully ignorant.
Right.
Because the numbers are so insane that, and you mentioned, players can't monetize their athletic talents, let's say, until they can go pro. But think about it. That's a very small percentage of all of these rosters.
Right.
Right. So let's say you're I don't know, like I was at University of Iowa from 94 or from 90 to 96. And no jokes about me taking a long time to graduate. So, but imagine you're the 8th guy or the 5th guy on that team. You didn't play in the NBA.
Right.
You were lucky to play in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Lucky. And most of those guys didn't. The best guy on the team had a cup of coffee in the NBA, 2.5 seasons. I don't know what he's doing now. I have no clue.
Right.
And yeah, I was like, I played. Iowa played the Fab Five, right? Those guys, but they were special even then.
Right.
And 3 of those guys had real careers. The 4th one played half a season. 5th guy didn't even make it. So, but my point is, those people who have no chance at playing in the NBA or Europe or China and are not going to monetize their talents, they're the ones getting taken for an even bigger ride because they're helping bring in insane amounts of money to the school, which, okay, all right, that's how it's going to go. But I think you have a good point, because it's so out of proportion that those people get a free education, which has, let's say it's just money. Let's say we just do dollar values. They'll get $25,000 a year. They get $100,000 worth of education, but they helped bring in $50 million or $10 million.
I think
that doesn't seem right.
Oh, definitely not. I think off air, before we started recording, we were speaking about no, actually you mentioned it on air, the requiem for the Big East. That's the 30 for 30 that spoke to the staying power of the Big East during the 1980s and early 90s.
Good 30 for 30 video. Yes.
One of the key points in terms of how the conference started to break up was the infrastructure of football. Now, you have certain schools that are football schools and basketball schools. You look at the University of Alabama, whose head coach is Avery Johnson, one of the great point guards for the San Antonio Spurs while they developed their dynasty. Avery's coaching the University of Alabama right now. They have a one-and-done prospect, and Colin Sexton, one of the best point guards in the country. He's gonna go pro this upcoming draft, but he's trying to establish the basketball program, right?
Right.
That's an SEC school, but they're clearly a football school. Now, you had Big East schools like the University of Miami that was a solid basketball school, but is really a football school.
Right.
Because they're in the Big East, they're able to capitalize on money from TV. And obviously, no matter what happens in America, football is de facto number 1 sport in America.
Yes.
Worldwide, basketball is number 2 to soccer, but in terms of American sports, football is number 1. So when you have a school who's semi-good in both sports or solid in both, you mentioned Michigan, they can arguably be great in both, right?
Right. USC, there are a few schools on that list.
Yeah. Right. So when you have a school that's dominant in both, the football money is always going to become paramount. And because of that, now Miami becomes an ACC school.
Right.
Now let's bring in Syracuse, for example. Syracuse is one of the forefathers of the Big East, right?
Yes.
Jim Boeheim, Georgetown, John Thompson,
St.
John's, John Conaseca, Raleigh Massimino, Villanova. But when you have Syracuse, who is a football school to a certain degree, they're able to get money and generate that money. Now they utilize that money and move to an ACC. You're killing all of the rivalries that the sport is built on. One.
Yes.
But in another way, all of that money being generated from TV, from sponsors and beyond. Those players in football have to sacrifice their bodies in ways that most other sports don't.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, the small percentage of players that don't make it to the NFL or the pro ranks of their respective sports.
Mm-hmm.
What about their bodies?
Right.
What about all the injuries that they have to
Yes.
endure
Right.
after their career is over?
Right.
How do you protect them from that? How do you ensure that? Some of
Right.
these guys aren't able to monetize their skills because they've only been locked in on one thing.
Right.
You get what I'm saying?
And it's funny, you bring up the perfect word. And when you say insure, right? How do they insure against that? Insurance is the measurement of risk.
Right.
And we haven't even gotten to the point, right, where I don't know, the backup running back, is backup for 2 years, starts at running back at big school X, doesn't really have a shot at the NCAA or at the NFL. Gets beaten up. Even it doesn't even need to be necessarily an insurance policy. It could be some kind of long-term payout of minimal, like, I don't know. You could do like we have tax deferred annuities. It could be an annuity, like where the NCAA sets you up with an annuity starting at age 30. You're going to get, even if it's something like 12 grand a year, $1,000 a month for 20 years. Right. That's nothing, right? You're not going to live on that. You're not going to be driving around in a Bentley on that. And those numbers are small.
Compared to how much money is brought in.
Right. It's nothing.
Right.
It's nothing. Right. And it's like, well, look, you took a beating and I just made those numbers up. I mean, those numbers that I just, age 30, $1,000 a month for 20 years. Those are just numbers I pulled out of thin air. But we haven't even gotten to that point yet. And no, what I don't quite understand anymore is people still cling to the shamateurism of the whole thing, right? It's scamateurs, shamateurs. The whole thing's a sham and everybody knows it. And we're still just ghost dancing about this amateur stuff. Take a small slice, right? Because you probably know the numbers better than I do with TV contracts, even at the college level. Forget about the pro level. And the college football money is huge. You do some kind of annuity program like that, it's a tiny slice of a small percentage, and now you can have now things can change. You get a little bit of something for I don't know, for sacrificing your body for the TV contract for Florida Gator football, because the backup tight end isn't going to play in the NFL,
right?
But that person at that level is going to be making, like you said, making huge sacrifice and being only doing football for the most part. I mean, you'll get some academics in there too, but you're going to be the backup tight end playing for the Gators. You and I both know, and you went to a hardcore basketball high school where I still work. The amount of time spent on that sport is huge. So at high school, you're young and you get supported, and it's kind of, you can kind of see the hierarchy. But then after that, and we won't even touch on corruption of AAU because that's not my forte, but I know it's a mess. That's another discussion. I'd have to do my homework.
Right.
But we know it's corrupt. But when you get to the college level, so many people get the non-pro types get left out in the cold in such a way. There's just too much money in the pot to try to keep the system going. I just don't know how long it can last.
But I want to touch on your point in terms of kind of circumventing the minor league system to a certain degree, because
right,
the NFL and college football are in unison in the fact that you can only enter the NFL when you're 3 years removed from your high school class. So
right.
Because of that, now players go to college. Obviously, because the sport is so demanding, they have to develop their bodies and kind of prepare for a grown man's game. This is true, right? But in the process, you're exposing your body to such danger, and to not have that safety net of something, it seems, you can't really comprehend that.
Yeah.
Now, with basketball, because these these players at a young age, you mentioned the AAU, they're exposed to how the system works, how the sneaker companies are able to fund certain trips and beyond, and just sponsors and things like that. These players at 14, 15 years old are seeing how it works.
Right.
Now, they get to the point where they're McDonald's All-Americans, Jordan Brand Classics, and All-Stars and stuff like that. Now you're starting to see players say, I don't want to go to college. I'm going to go play overseas. You had a high-priced recruit for Syracuse. He decommitted from Syracuse and said he's going to try his run in the D League before he applies for the draft. So you're going to start to see the minor league system from the NBA start to become more prevalent, because these players are starting to recognize their value and just have an opportunity to try to make some money. And probably, if you know you're a blue chipper and you have an opportunity to get to the league, before you even go to college. You have some late bloomers in college, but you have those guys that are one and done anyway in college. They know where their career is going.
Yes,
I have an idea already.
Yes, yeah, and that, I'm actually kind of surprised you don't see more of it. Who am I thinking of? Brandon Jennings.
Brandon Jennings,
right? The Brandon Jennings route, where you're going to go overseas and play for a year or two, and then come over. And I thought that was pretty bold. I thought that was pretty intense, and it worked out for him until he got hurt. But he's a millionaire. Look at what he's made over the past.
Right. He was still able to have a sustainable career.
Yes,
and I think at this point, especially players especially one and done players more recently, they're not really concerned about the trajectory of their careers, let's say. Whereas before, a coach could, manipulate, and I'm not saying it in an evil way, but they can manipulate it in their favor to say, you can work on your draft stock, you can work on your game, you can polish up your game before you go to the draft, so that way you'll be a better player. A lot of these players are one and done without mature games.
Right.
Mature games in terms of their skill set. But they know that as long as they can get in the pool of NBA players, as long as they can have the exposure necessary to play at a high level, they'll find a way to, last in the league.
Right.
A lot of players like that. But I don't fault them, me being a purist of the game and wanting to see the highest quality of basketball. I should always say, well, a player can stay an extra year or two to round out and develop a skill necessary to be great at something when they get to the league. But then, playing devil's advocate, you say, well, if I'm 18 years old and they're telling me I'm a lottery pick and I'm going to get millions of dollars, how can I turn that down?
Right.
Because you run the risk of, okay, I come back in my sophomore year and I injure my back.
Right. Or who knows what? It could be anything. You could be in a car accident, right? You could get hit by someone on a bike. Who knows what kind of freak stuff goes on? And that's the thing. I agree with you. It becomes a very difficult question, because you have, this clumsy attempt to keep the NCAA doing its thing with this. You got to play 1 year in the NCAA. You know how I am with this. We've talked about it before. The draft, the general managers, and Bill Simmons used to years ago write a great column on the atrocious GM summit.
Right.
And you could just feel the frustration coming off the page, because, you're just not going to be able to sell the world on the fact that somebody like John Koncak, or, I'm going back to the 80s, right? These ridiculous drafts where you'll have somebody who's just a non-presence, but because he's 7 feet, you draft him 4th or whatever it is. That these people are legitimate draft picks. And so the NBA general managers have set up a system to try to protect them from themselves. Right. Yeah. And one of the last of his columns on this was a disbelief, but he knew, this is Simmons now, that Greg Oden was going to get picked before Kevin Durant. And I'm a high school English teacher, and I'm like, you can't be serious. Now, Oden was turning into a real rebounder and a shot blocker before he got hurt,
Right.
Right? You look at Odin's that second season, he was really starting to put it together, but he wasn't going to be Kevin Durant.
Coming
He
out
was
of the
going to
Big
be
12, averaging 25
right.
points per game, playing
Oh
the
man.
year.
Oh, forget it.
But see, here's the thing, right? To draft a Kevin Durant at that time, you're kind of going against conventional wisdom. They say, well, hindsight being 2020, you see how the game has evolved into the perimeter game that it is. Most bigs now have the big is coming back, but they have perimeter-based skills that have evolved the game in a way. But going back 50, 60 years, conventional wisdom says you build a team around a big man. And if you can find a big man that's able to patrol the paint and assert himself inside, and you kind of build around that inside out, the game is going in the direction of Durant and LeBron and Westbrook and Harden and so
Right.
many others. But at that time, what would be considered to be a no-brainer, you kind of didn't want to gamble.
But I think you're being too nice. I think you're being too kind, right?
No, you're right. I mean, it's like it's similar to Sam Bowie and Michael Jordan. If Bobby Knight calls you and tells you to draft Michael Jordan, and you say, well, we have a two guard, and he says, well, draft him at center, then you have to do that.
Yes.
But you have Clyde Drexler, so you say, well, let's go with Bowie.
Right. Yeah.
Despite what the injury history has told you.
Yeah. And that's a good 30 for 30 as well. There's one on the Sam Bowie case that was, it really makes the case that it wasn't a complete flop of a pick. It's just that Bowie was fragile.
Yeah.
It's interesting stuff.
And he was a player who, despite his injuries, I think Michael Jordan's shadow really put a damper on what he was able to accomplish beyond those Portland years. He was able to, have a sustainable career to a certain degree. He lasted a decade in the league, which when you can get to 10 years in the NBA, that's pretty solid.
Yes, he was a serviceable center when I was in high school. The end of my high school career, he was with the Nets, and he was 16-10 every night, 16-9, 17-8. Like, he was a serviceable, legit center in the NBA.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, that's the guy that was drafted before Jordan. Right. But that and not only the specter of Jordan, but also that draft, which was so insanely great that that he's going to be constantly be a punchline, undeservedly so. And the 30 for 30 really makes that clear, that Bowie as a pick wasn't a laugh line. It was actually, there was some legitimacy to Bowie as a player. It's just he goes down in history as that kind of thing. But nowadays, I just think it's different, because then you had everybody doing 3 or 4 years in college. And you mentioned people needing to fill out their game, developing, right? Development is a big deal. It's amazing how George Karl, of all people, who I like Karl's style. So I kind of like these Maverick types. But he mentions what you did, that you have these supremely talented AAU players who've been told they're the greatest thing in the world since they were 12. And they do, you know how it is. You go to a place like Kentucky, you play 1 year, you stop going to class as soon as March Madness is over, right? Because you weren't there for that anyway. And you get drafted in the top 5, or you're a lottery pick. It's quite possible that you're a physical talent beyond all imagination, but your grasp of team basketball isn't that great.
And you have to learn on the fly. But see, here's the thing. If you're blessed to be in a situation like a Kobe Bryant, where you're young, similar to the age of a one and done player, but you're blessed to be able to be drafted in a franchise who doesn't need you right away.
Right.
Then you're able to learn.
That's a perfect storm. That's exactly what he landed in. A perfect storm. Look at his first season.
Right.
Come on.
He's able to make his mistakes while not necessarily affecting the bottom line of the team.
Right.
By the time he's able to mature, which would be 3 to 4 years later, you have a polished product ready to soar.
Yes.
And destroy the league for another 15 years.
Right. Yes, and think about that. Del Harris was playing him at small forward as an experiment, and he did it for I'd say easily 20 to 50 games. He came off the bench. He was at small forward, and he was developing. And you can see the development in how he played and the numbers and the confidence. That was a perfect situation. It's just that now you'll have somebody like that. Imagine Kobe Bryant being drafted first,
because
I think
he's looked at as the franchise now.
Right.
So he can't make the same mistakes.
No.
You know, but to your point about what George Karl said, which I have reservations about George Karl, but we can get into that about another time.
It's a good book.
I think in terms of how he was able to distinguish that, a lot of these players, because they've been coddled in that way,
yep,
they've been featured in that way in a lot of their games, they've always been the best player. So now they don't know how to adjust when somebody's better than them.
Mm-hmm.
How can you be, for your whole life, you've been the number one scorer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then usually when you go to these college programs, you're the savior for that particular year or two. Let's say you go to school for 2 years, but you're the savior. So a lot of times the coach is going to let you kind of do what you want to do, and they'll ride your coattails to wherever you can get to, Elite 8, Sweet 16, whatever.
Right.
You're going to go to the NBA where you're playing with a James Harden.
Yes.
Okay. No, not even James Harden. Because you're going to be a high lottery pick. The Rockets are going to be low pick.
Right.
Let's say you go to the Nets, right?
Okay.
Now you're on the Nets. You expect to be a number one player, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you get to a team where Spencer Dinwiddie is clearly better than you.
Yeah. Yeah, right?
One, that's going to mess with your ego because you assume you're better than Spencer Dinwiddie, right?
Right.
But this
Who's playing very well.
This is a quality NBA player.
Yes.
Who not only has a solid skill set, but he has NBA know-how.
Right.
So you have to figure out now, which this is where the struggle is. This is where the gray area is. You have to develop another skill to add value beyond what you're used to. What your identity is. You're used to being a number one scorer, facilitator, ball dominant player. Right. Now you have to learn how to move off the ball because they already have a point guard.
Right. Yes. And the 10th guy on the team who's 6'8", wiry, can jump through the gym, D's you up in practice and does a really good job of it. Right? That's something that's never happened before. Now all of a sudden, oh wait, hold on a minute. How did this happen?
Right.
You have this weird dynamic and they're also very young. You know, these people come in, their first pick, they did one and done at, Kentucky or Louisville or somewhere. Duke nowadays, even hard to believe.
Most definitely. I bet. We're gonna come back to that, but finish your point.
Just very quickly. And so these one and done types come in, and unless you're a physical freak like an Anthony Davis or a DeMarcus Cousins, one of these people, these kinds of things can happen, and they're very young. And these are men, right? These are people who are like lunch pail guys. Now, again, they make millions of dollars, but they, I didn't know who Spencer Dinwiddie was until he came to the Nets because I live in New York City, right? I live in the Bronx, and I like it that the Nets are in Brooklyn and all this kind of stuff. I mean, they play 4 blocks away from where I went to high school. And but that's a guy I'd be willing to bet that Spencer Dinwiddie has a pretty good grasp on reality and doesn't think that the world should bow down to him every 5 seconds because of who he is. Now I'm guessing on that. I don't know the guy, but that's the perfect person and the perfect situation, because the guys who come in the high lottery picks, some of them are so raw and so undeveloped that those guys aren't going to be giving up their spot. And the coach sees it. This is what Karl was talking about. The coach sees who's going to get them to win. And superstar X doesn't get the NCAA God treatment, and it causes problems.
But I think more than anything, and I want to go back to the point you made about like Coach K and different schools, I think the paradigm of the game has changed in terms of coaches. Initially you had your outliers of John Calipari's that would, every now and then you'll have John Calipari. His system is one and done. Cultivates the type of talent necessary to excel in today's NBA.
Mm-hmm.
But prior to that, he was really the only coach doing that, and he was frowned upon in doing so. Then you had your programs where in the past, if you played for Coach K, you were staying for 3 years.
Yes.
If you played for John Thompson, you were
Mm-hmm.
staying for 3 years.
Right.
If you played for Jim Boeheim, you were staying for 3 years. Well,
Yes.
now it's a shift
Mm-hmm.
where every school now is looking for that blue chip one and done player, because not only because now they see what Coach Calipari has done, and he's only won one national championship, but the prestige that he's developed around basketball culture and with the players in particular, he's developed a program that not only has you excel at the NCAA level, but his program really prepares you for the NBA, because most of the time his roster is stacked with players that are likened in the same way.
Yes.
Most programs have one superstar and players that build around them.
Mm-hmm.
He has 4 at a time.
Right.
So now, if you're Karl Anthony Towns, where you've played in New Jersey in high school, you've been the man. You've been dominant. You've been able to do what you want to do. Well, now you have Devin Booker on your team. You have Tyler Ulis on your team. You have the Harrison twins on your team. You have multiple players who are also NBA prospects. So now it forces each of them to develop other skills, prepare them to go to the NBA.
Right. And continue.
In that regard, not to cut you off, I think in that regard, Coach Cal deserves a lot of credit in that respect, because he's really preparing players for the next level.
Yes. And it works. And that's why you wonder if those Kentucky teams, if they played the Sacramento Kings, I wonder who would win some of those games. You know what I mean? Like, those teams are so power laden.
I mean, in terms of the age differences, they're not really that far off. I mean, if you have a Sacramento team that's filled with vets, more often than not, Sacramento will win. But if you put Sacramento's core against UK's core,
it's going to be interesting.
A competitive game.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, even Krzyzewski with down in Duke, I remember when Elton Brand left after 2 years. It was
big news.
It was big news. Like, you just didn't do that.
Right.
Whoa, what's going on with this? And now you're right. It's kind of somebody like Coach K is going to do what's required to stay successful. He's not going to shoot himself in the foot. But I always wonder if you could do and you would probably remember the names better than I do. The current coach of the Celtics,
Brad Stevens.
Yeah, Brad Stevens. I wonder, because he was very close to winning 2 titles, if I remember correctly.
Right.
Did they have any megawatt stars, or did he have a system of longtime college-age guys, veteran 2, 3, 4-year players who were good enough, and their, I don't know, system is a bad word, because now it's kind of like, the system, it has been
it's frowned upon in a certain respect, but
but he had let me just use program. He had a long-term veteran NCAA program. Were there any megawatt stars, or did he manage to do it the old-fashioned way, let's say?
Well, I think depending on the profile of the program, it allows you to cultivate and develop over time, similar to what that Butler program did with Stevens.
Right.
You look at teams that are able to make the runs in the NCAA tournament, the Gonzagas from years ago. That now Gonzaga is considered to be a primetime Division I program. Before they would be considered a mid-major, but you have an NCAA run, national championship run, and you're a primetime program now.
Right.
But mid-major programs are afforded that opportunity to have those players. They're D1 talent, but they're rounding out. They have to, polish their game and develop confidence and just take time to develop.
Right.
Now, the high-profile programs, the Kentuckys, the Dukes, the Syracuse, the Michigan States, even Missouri to a certain degree, like just different programs all over the nation trying to make that splash.
Right.
They'll look to get a one-and-done type of player because just for 1 year, if it's for 1 year, you'll be able to say, okay, we made a run.
Right.
You might get a Oregon every now and then. They might have a player that stayed for 2 years, just long enough to make a splash in the Pac-12. But their plan is to go pro after 1 or 2 years. You might have programs like that, but the blue chip programs, the Kansases, the Dukes, the Syracuse, Michigan State, and beyond, those type of programs are looking for those one and done type of players to remain relevant.
Right. So let's do one. If you don't mind, let's do one more thing because I'm getting text messages from the family. I'm at a different level than you are.
I got you.
But it's come up, and I actually was actively wondering what you would say about this. The general manager of the Cleveland Cavaliers, LeBron James.
Okay.
He's also their coach, from what I hear.
He wears a lot of caps.
He wears a lot of hats. He just said, and I'm going to lay my cards on the table. He just said if you're voting for MVP, you should vote for him. Now, I think everybody's going to vote for Harden, but I'm such a big LeBron James fan that I give it to over just a hair's width over Harden. I would vote for LeBron James because he's not just doing what he does, but he's had more difficulty this season than maybe any of the others other than his first 2 with the Cavaliers. So I say yes. I think LeBron is right. Your call.
Well, I think to that point, I think LeBron, and this is something that Michael Jordan has gone through. So Kareem has gone through in the 70s and 80s. When you're such a supreme talent and a supreme player that your peers recognize you as the best player in the game, you're tasked with playing to that standard consistently year in and year out, to such a degree that the fans take it for granted. And I think for LeBron, especially in those early years, well, not early years because he's been able to, sustain for over a decade now, but the mid 2000s and into those Miami years, he was at such a peak level, and winning 4 MVPs in 5 years, that particular stretch, that only had been seen by Bill Russell, Michael Jordan, Will Chamberlain. That type of dominance at an MVP level. To see that over that time, anything less than that, you kind of like, oh, it's not the same. But if you compare his numbers compared to another player, it's like otherworldly. So for LeBron, I think his standard that he created for himself and that everybody has seen, anything less than that, you're going to say he's not living up to that anymore.
Right.
In his recent stint with Cleveland, these last 4 years, as great as he's been, as consistent as he's been, there's always been cracks in it because he's been able to dominate for such a long time.
Right.
When you have dominated in the Eastern Conference year after year after year after year, you take the regular season for granted.
Yes.
You don't play as hard. You don't give as much effort defensively as you're used to because you have to save your body.
Yeah, well, he didn't play defense in January. He took the month of January off.
Right.
But 27-9-9 and dragging that team to a place where it doesn't belong, I think is pretty impressive.
It is, especially in year 15.
Yes.
In year 15, the longevity that he's been able to showcase at the level that he's been able to showcase, we haven't seen it ever.
I'm giving you a vote for MVP. Do you give it to him? Do you give it to Harden? Do you give it to someone else?
I give it to Harden. I think Harden is one of the rare players in NBA history that has MVP fatigue without ever winning an MVP.
Yeah, true.
If you look at the last 4 years, from 2014 to 2015, James Harden finished second in MVP in 2015 to Steph Curry. Steph Curry had a better team in terms of record, and they won the championship.
Yeah.
But Harden had to carry a lot. He had to do a lot more with less. In that particular year, they won 57 games, fell short of the championship. Harden didn't get the MVP. 2016, Steph Curry led a 73-win team. He was the best player on the team, averaged 30 points. He actually won the MVP, in my opinion. by Christmas.
Yeah, that's true.
So he's the first all-time unanimous MVP, right?
Yep.
And in 2017, Russell Westbrook goes on like this triple-double clutch time, crunch time tear that really took the league over in a year that was supposed to be de facto Warriors.
Right, and
So
he
now,
drags his team, right? It's another argument for another time, but he drags his team to success.
Right. So now you have all of these different arguments put up in one pot. It's always going to be an odd man out. So when you have a player like LeBron who has constantly won it year after year after year, it's easy to say, well, he has 4. Let's give it to somebody else.
Right.
That's why you'll see in 1993, Charles Barkley, who had a career year, peak year-wise, 1993 Suns, he can get one. Or Karl Malone, who had exceptional numbers year after year after year after year, finally get some recognition in 1997.
Yeah, finally. The 1989 version of Karl Malone, by the way, was arguably better. But yeah, it was like his turn. And I hate that kind of stuff because but he was running into Jordan at his peak.
Right.
So what are you gonna do?
Right. So when you have situations like that, LeBron has fallen, and that shows you how great that he has been, that he's been able to hit that Michael Jordan, Kareem level where you can say, well, Kareem won 6 MVPs in 10 years. Let's try to give it to, and this is not a knock on Moses. This is not a knock on Dr. J or anybody, but even when Moses Malone was winning MVPs or when Dr. J was winning MVPs, you knew Kareem was the best player.
Right.
You get what I'm saying? So LeBron, and I think for the first time, I don't want to hold you because I know you got to do.
We got a couple minutes.
But I think in recent times, this is the closest time in any of LeBron's years that he has players close to him in terms of being the best player in the league. Now, you can make an argument for a multitude of players. You can talk about Stephen Curry and how he's revolutionized the game, not just his team, but how the game has shifted to the three-point line and how he's become the focal point of offense now.
Right.
He's the face of that.
Yes.
His team, in terms of offensive numbers, offensive rating, just the efficiency that they've played with over the last 4 years.
Yes, and the style of play they play.
Right. Those numbers rank up there with any all-time offense. I'm talking about all-time Lakers. We're talking about the early 90s Bulls. We're talking about the Celtics of the mid-'80s as well. They're the face of that. We can mention LeBron. You can mention James Harden and how the Rockets of the last 2 years rival those Warriors teams offensively, at least. We have to see how this particular system with Chris Paul and Harden translates to playoff success. But in regular season-wise, in terms of how they've played and how they've been able to manipulate the game to their will in terms of three-pointers, James Harden is the focal point of that.
Yes.
And then you have the Kevin Durant, uber efficient player, uber efficient offense. One of the best offensive players we've ever seen.
And too big. He's not supposed to be that big. I see what he does, and I'm like, wait a minute. Isn't he 6'10"?
Right.
You know, like it's maybe taller. I don't know what they list him at these days.
He's listed at 6'11" and 3/4.
And that's, man, we could go on forever because I'll tell you what. I think somebody like Ralph Sampson. Remember Ralph Sampson wanting to do other things than play back to the basket?
He was born a little too early.
He was born too early. I'm telling you that you see those guys from back then, and it was just, nope, you're 7'3". You're going to go back to and you remember Sampson was a skinny guy and
he could shoot the jumper.
He wasn't afraid to handle the ball.
Right.
And it was Bill Fitch was like, no, you're going to run down the court. You're going to stand in the lane and you're going to score over smaller guys. And I don't blame Fitch for that, but and they were lucky they had Olajuwon. They were lucky because it allowed Sampson to move 5 or 6 feet out from the basket.
But I think more than anything, too, how the game is evolved in terms of medically, what the advancements in the game has been. One of the reasons why LeBron has been able to be so sustained for so long, it's come out that he spends over $1 million to take care of his body throughout an entire year.
Wow.
Then the resources weren't there, both individually and team-wise, to protect players like that. So when you had players with injury histories like a Sam Bowie or Ralph Sampson or Penny Hardaway
or Andrew Toney, right? My Sixers from Andrew Toney, Mo Cheeks, Moses, Dr. J. I mean, Toney went down with injuries, but he could flat out play.
Right.
It was a crying shame that he had to end his career early.
Right.
There's a name that our legions of fans who are watching this,
right.
Go look up Andrew Toney.
Right.
That's a name that no young person knows. You might as well have said E.T. or, Yoda.
Toney was a great contributor to that 1983 Sixers championship, the last championship of the Philadelphia 76ers.
Yes.
So we're very appreciative of Andrew Toney, Bobby Jones, Mo Cheeks. Shout out to Maurice Cheeks, who will be enshrined in the 2018 Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame. Well-deserved, one of the best defensive point guards you will ever see in your lifetime.
Yeah, I don't get it. I mean, he got forgotten real quick, which is again another crying shame. But yeah, man. And next time we have so much to talk about. I'll have to do this soon because I want you to file this in the back drawer because I know it's your show and I want you to introduce this possibly next time. But you have a team, and I know DeMarcus Cousins got hurt, but can or could a team with one or two good guards, and they've got one, and two guys like Davis and Cousins, just because their styles are so different, do they have a legitimate shot? Could they? And I want you to file this one away because I want you, if we could think about it, take on a team like the Rockets or the Warriors and put up at least a good fight. I mean, talking about anybody beating the Warriors these days is kind of silly because the only thing holding them back this year has been injuries.
Right.
But you've got two big guys who can do whatever they want in Davis and Cousins. Is that the echo of the old NBA coming back to say, not so fast. If I can get two guys like this, all that fun metrics, run and gun, corner threes, or dunks, well, you're going to take out dunks, right? Cousins and Davis are going to see to it that the dunks are out. So if they have a bad shooting night, do the Pelicans, I know this sounds crazy, right? Long term, give me your 30 seconds on, do you think they even, have I lost it? Has the old man gone crazy? Or do I have something?
I don't think you're far off. I just think I don't think you're far off with the premise, but I think you're far off with the team. I don't think it'll work against the Warriors because they're efficient. But I think it'll work against a team like the Rockets in this respect. The Rockets dominate by the volume of threes they take. And while the Warriors are similar in that way, they bait you into taking threes that they know that they will make.
Right.
See, it doesn't matter how many threes. It doesn't matter who takes the threes for the Rockets. It could be PJ Tucker. It can be Chris Paul. It could be James Harden. It could be Trevor Ariza. But see, those 3-point shooters are not Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, or Kevin Durant.
Yeah, it's like Sega, like what they've got.
So while
they never go into a slump.
Right. So then to your point about the bigs, while Boogie and AD, they do play exceptionally well in the post and they can handle the ball. They have a skill set that can manipulate what Golden State does. Golden State's gift outside of their prowess as shooters is their defensive versatility. So you have to be able to, if you're a New Orleans team who really is the outlier in having two bigs. If you do have a big, you only have one. They have two.
Right.
You have to be able to protect them from foul trouble.
Yes.
And do they have usually you have a big man and you have the hustle big. Yeah.
Right.
Scoring big, and then you have the guy that'll be dirty. But you can't have both of those guys.
Right. Like hockey, you got your goon out there.
Right, to protect him.
To protect him, yeah.
Right. So now, who's that guy for those two?
Right.
It's a difference. So it's a story. It's a question for another day. We'll definitely dive into it. I want to thank you for coming on. but we will have time to dive into that because the Pelicans will be in the playoffs this year. Unfortunately, without DeMarcus Cousins with his Achilles injury, but they can still be a scary matchup for teams coming up. So playoffs start in about 2 weeks. We'll have a lot of time to break down of matchups and beyond. And the Final Four will be going on this Saturday, and then going into next week we'll have the final. So we'll have a lot to talk about. I want to thank you for your time.
Yes.
Where can the audience find you in your work?
My main site is the freelanceteacher.com. And I, as a high school English teacher, as you know, having been in my class, I've tried to do what we're doing here online. So it's kind of ported my writing and my instruction to the internet. So that's the freelanceteacher.com. One of my side businesses, Side Hustle, Mr. Rhodes, they're calling it nowadays, is I run a small travel company, TFT Travel Group.
Okay.
And, that's tfttravelgroup.com as well. It's also on Instagram. And I take young people overseas. We were in Ecuador and we were in Peru, and we'll have to talk about this one day because it really widens your scope about what's going on here in the United States. And then you go to a place like the Sacred Valley in Peru, or you go into the Andes Mountains and go to Cuenca, Ecuador, and you see how it is other places. And it's some eye-opening experience for young people. And I recommend it highly. Where, I speak sports at work. Where do I tell people to go to find your stuff? Where can I get your content?
You can subscribe to my YouTube channel, Ask Isaiah, where you have all the episodes of Ask Isaiah. You can follow me on Twitter at Ask Isaiah, AskIsaiah, or you can follow me on Instagram at Ask Isaiah, AskIsaiah.
Fantastic.
Thank you for your time, Doug Marolla. Great conversation. We'll have many more.
Yes.
Beyond the Freelance Teacher, freelanceteacher.com.
Yeah.
Check out Ask Isaiah, hashtag Ask Isaiah. We'll be back soon.
Yes, fantastic. Thanks for having me. We'll do this again soon.
Definitely.